Hey, gang, DP here. We're talking consensus All-America quarterbacks at the University of Nebraska.
You are Locked On Huskers, your daily podcast on the Nebraska Cornhuskers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, gang, DP here. Thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. Want to thank the folks from Birddogs. Rico, tell them all about it.
Thanks, DP. Have you ever wondered what life would be like with only one pair of pants or shorts? Well, wonder no more, because Birddogs has the pants for you. They look great, feel great, will have you looking at yourself in the mirror like, damn! Their comfortable, versatile fabric allows you to wear these to work, on the golf course, or even on a hot date. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege and enter the code LOCKEDONCollege with your order to get a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler, just like mine. Back to you, DP.
Thanks, Rico. Much appreciated. We thank the folks from Birddogs. Comfy shorts, indeed. What if I told you that my favorite part about Locked On Huskers is that it forces me to go back and get confirmation for what I know or what I think I know about Nebraska football. And in these conversations, it's not for me, I'm not trying to provide all the answers, but sometimes just to get to the right question. And the question was, if you're asking for a Mount Rushmore of Nebraska quarterbacks, that somewhere in the discussion you get to All-Americans, you get to consensus All-Americans, and then you get to two-time All-Americans and record breakers. And the consensus All-American at quarterback for Nebraska. There are six. Here's how we get to it. 6 consensus All-Americans at the quarterback position. All the polls, all of the writers, etc. And one of them stunned me. Stunned. But I'm going to save him for later. Yeah. Of the 6 quarterbacks we're going to talk about, I want to save one for last. We'll start, of course. That for Nebraska football, multi-sport athletes are common. But the number of multi-sport athletes who are consensus All-Americans at quarterback, but who are also drafted at shortstop by the New York Yankees, that list is very short. It's very unique. And our dear friend Steve Taylor is that quarterback that from pulled out, drafted by the Yankees out of high school in Fresno, All-American as a junior at Nebraska. Had better stat numbers in every category as a senior, but didn't make All-American in the senior year. Pretty mind-blowing that to have plus 800 yards rushing, over 1,000 yards passing, that was rare air. That didn't happen all that often. And then in his career, 2,800 yards passing and 2,100 yards on the ground. 32 touchdowns on the ground over the course of that thing. That Steve Taylor in the All-American year, and again, at 6 foot, 205, athletic, cerebral, playmaker. He simply made plays. But those numbers, there's only a handful of quarterbacks who threw for over 2,800 yards and ran for 2,100. There just aren't that many of them. So shout out to our dear friend Steve Taylor. They're quarterbacks who get lost in the shuffle, and it's difficult sometimes. But this quarterback was the iconic quarterback for Nebraska in its heyday, and he had options. He could have gone several places. But maybe the most underrated passer because he did everything else so well. In his time at Nebraska, he was at the top of the list in passing percentage and touchdowns. He also helped them win their first 2 titles. Jerry Tagge from Green Bay at 6'2", 215 pounds. From the outside looking in, you think of Tagge as that option quarterback, that wishbone quarterback, that option veer, whatever version of it you want to call it, because it flex sometimes. But I remember Tagge and Kenny and Rodgers. I remember the tearaway jerseys that ripped down to the bare bones, and they would hang from a string. And Tagge would get back there, and you could see a piece of the one, and none of the you couldn't see it. Like, that was just it. But Tagge's numbers, that at a 63% completion rate in his time at Nebraska, that he left at number 1. We think of him as a runner more than as a passer, but remember, Johnny Rodgers was doing his work outside with Jerry Tagge as quarterback. And those first several of the biggest plays of the championship years is Tagge on a keeper, scoring, Tagge in short yardage, Tagge making a good decision with the ball. But his ability to throw the football was exceptional. And it's understated and underrated, and I think we should do better for Jerry Tagge. 4,700 yards passing in Nebraska. What are you talking about? What do you mean? Oh, man. And I think he's still in the top 10 decades later. So, yeah, bravo to you, Jerry Tagge. He was the first Nebraska quarterback of note and renown for me. Again, being a kid in D.C., I'm watching on Thanksgiving and the Huskers would end up on TV because they were good. And it was necessary. And I'm happy for it. Eric Crouch is, when you think Heisman winner, the number that jumps off to me is touchdowns rushing. That no player who's ever played at the University of Nebraska, not with all the great runners, not with all the great Heisman winners, not with any of that nobody got into the end zone more than Eric Crouch. And the style in which he did it, because sometimes he was the receiver, sometimes he was the passer, oftentimes he pulled the ball down and simply banged his head on the goalpost because he was more athletic than everybody else. Underrated as a sprinter, top-level speed, underrated in toughness. I mean, that shows that you go to the NFL and go from quarterback to playing in the backfield, playing on special teams. That takes a lot. But winning the O'Brien Ward Camp Award and then the Heisman Trophy, some people at the time thought that it was given. No. Nothing given, everything earned. And when you talk about Crouch's career, 2001 was an exceptional career. And to think at 6'1", 200 pounds and could run the way he did, he was a force and a factor. But that's not all of them. And the second group, we get a little different because there's some players that you don't necessarily always think about. And one of those we're going to talk about. Yes, we are. We're going to talk about the player that helped Johnny Rodgers win the Heisman Trophy. We'll be right back. Hey, gang. Once again, thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. And I appreciate you every day, as you folks who tune in for the content. If you have not subscribed, please do so. And feel free to put your comments down in the comment section as well. Future editions of this, what you want me to talk about. There's tons of content, especially for the off season, to go through and just reassess the program and revisit the program as it was to figure out what it should be and what it would look like. I like to say copy success through that. Looking back, we'll tell you some things that work. There is a way There's an actual way for Nebraska to be elite in football once again. How do we know that? Because it's already happened. It's already been here. Being able to recruit to the state, that's already been figured out. There's a way. Even with NIL changing it, the recipe's the same. You know what players you need to go get. Go and do it. And you can get them to Lincoln, Nebraska because it's been done. It's been done for decades. It's been done. There's a way. I wanted to talk about this player because in the discussion, a lot of what happens in the space is that we get used to repeating narratives and facts rather than going deeper into those facts. And I'm old enough to remember the 1970, 71, 72 Huskers. We didn't have the sort of access that we have now. We didn't have the connectivity. There was no internet. There was no satellite television for us to be able to watch every game. We didn't get daily reports. We didn't get bloggers and videos. We didn't get to see, quite frankly, there was a magazine that would come out, once a week, and you sprinted to the mailbox to get that report. Like, you wanted to know, and you consumed it, and you digested it, trying to find out more about the people that you wanted to know about. One of said players is, and I want to set the table. Think 1970, 1971. Think Nebraska, Johnny Rodgers, the punt return against Oklahoma, Heisman pose. Think of Keith Jackson calling it. You can think of the infamous Nebraska play-by-play call. Think of all of those things. Think of the national championships in 1970 and 1971. But it was 1972 in which Johnny Rodgers won the Heisman. It wasn't 71. It was 72. And if Jerry Taggy was out the door in 1971, who was the quarterback who helped Johnny Rodgers win the Heisman Trophy? Who was under center? Who did that? I can tell you a couple of things about him if you'd like to know. Over his 3 years as a quarterback, the Huskers were 27-7-2. When his career was over at Nebraska, he held 1 national, 4 Big 8 records, and 12 Nebraska passing records. He was injured his junior year, but played through in spite of that. Led the Big 8 and the passing charts in 1974 as a senior. The numbers are exceptional. He played at 6'2", about 190 pounds. Junior year, he didn't play much early. They routed UCLA, played against North Carolina State. But Hum came back and played. David Hum is the quarterback we're talking about. David Hum was the quarterback who helped Johnny Rodgers win the Heisman Trophy. Season record, Big 8 record. The Nebraska Big 8 season record for 2,259 yards passing. Big 8 record. Husker record in TDs with 18. David Hum out of Bishop Gorman in Vegas, and he's part of that legacy of great players and how Bishop Gorman becomes the force that it is. So good that he was directly recruited through Joe Namath for Bear Bryant. He still chose Nebraska. Speech major. He is the unspoken genius of the position. He went on, of course, to play in the NFL, but listen, Husker fans need to give David Hum as much credit as possible. Because when you talk about the greatness of Nebraska and the transition from the Devaney years to the Osborne years, the run game, the power run game, to being able to throw the ball around as the game evolved, Nebraska evolved, and the biggest part of the evolution was David Humm stepping into the very, very sizable shoes of Jerry Taggy. We don't talk about him enough. We have to do better. We have to do better. There's another player who quarterbacked in the Super Bowl. Now, how many Nebraska quarterbacks started in the Super Bowl? Look, courtesy of Carson, California. Vince Ferragamo then came into Nebraska after David Humm 4 years later and broke Humm's passing records. He had time at Cal before he came to Nebraska, so some of that is, the purity of being a 4-year or 5-year Husker. That doesn't exist here, but okay, that's fine. But his numbers are insane. 46 passing touchdowns in his college career, over 5,000 yards passing. Yeah, some of those are at Cal, but look, the accomplishments are still the same. When you talk about great Nebraska quarterbacks, the names David Humm and Vince Ferragamo are 2 of the 6 consensus All-Americans. Crouch, consensus. Steve Taylor, consensus. Jerry Taggy, consensus. Ferragamo, Humm, consensus. But there's one head of the class. And rightfully so. We'll talk about that great elite Nebraska quarterback when we come back to Locked On Huskers. To paraphrase Public Enemy, 1995. The year, an exceptional year. And to talk to Husker greats from various generations, there were several names that come into the conversation. And if you start talking about the best Nebraska quarterbacks, period, there's a long list. There's 2 Martinez's, there's Gans, you can go through Turner Gill, part of the triplets. You could talk about a ton of quarterbacks. But a thing happens when you talk Nebraska quarterbacks to Nebraskans and you talk to former players within the program. They will all respond with the same thing. If you're talking Nebraska quarterbacks, you're talking Tommy Frazier, and then you're talking everybody else. That's all that can be said. Voted one of the top players in college football history. Period. Like the greatness, the great plays and great moments, big plays and big games. At 6'2", 205, maybe. I don't know. You could say that he and Crouch were both just as difficult to tackle, but no. National champions in 1994 and 95. Camp winner, which is a big deal. Johnny Unitas Golden Arm winner, 1995. Player of the Year, 1995. Davey O'Brien, he was a finalist. He was a Max Word finalist. But he was the offensive player of the year, Walter Camp. And the numbers just tell a wonderful story. Tommy Frazier came to Nebraska and did a thing at such a high level that even 40 years later, people still talk about him. 30 years later, they talk about him with the same passion and pride. Tommy Frazier elevated Nebraska's football team and probably was the best player on what some would say was the best college football team as ever assembled. And Tommy Frazier was head and shoulders above them all. Everybody involved will tell you the entire country was trying to figure out how to deal with Tommy Frazier in this Nebraska offense. Numbers that are mind-blowing. His total yards per game, the offense's total offense per game, points on the board. And remember, he wasn't playing late into many of the games that he led this Husker team. But in the biggest games of his career, Tommy Frazier was better than every other great player on the football field. We'll get down to one day the Mount Rushmore of quarterbacks at Nebraska. We'll do that soon. But I wanted to set the standard for the discussion because there were 6 consensus All-Americans. 6. For all the other quarterbacks that had great years, great moments, great games, etc., there are only 6 that were consensus All-Americans for their entire body of work in a college football season. So if you're going to have the discussion over the Mount Rushmore quarterbacks at the University of Nebraska, you start with Tommy Frazier, and then you take a deep, long look at the other 5 consensus All-Americans, because that's where the discussion belongs. I'll take your Mount Rushmore down in the comments. Feel free. Have at it. And I thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. Greatly appreciate you. We'll close this episode, as we do all others, with those 3 words we love so much. Go Big Red.